man-to-man, one-on-one coverage because the safety rolls to Jefferson's side.
This guy's like becoming like a circus act. Like he could do this.
Von Rock caught a ball with his thighs. We didn't even talk about that.
It was more of with his ass.
If he throws a good ball, this is a running, catching touchdown untouched.
To become who we want to be as individuals, and at the end of the day, that's going to help us be a successful offense.
Like KP does like these flips after every win. And I'm like just waiting for him to do his flips.
You can tune in anywhere that you guys follow us on social media.
Shout out to Jalen Ramsey. He sucks.
Welcome to the Practice Squad podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host Mark. We are headed into pretty much the most boring news week for the NFL, but we are here together with a brand new intro. Trying to
shout out to
Jonathan
and his girlfriend Hannah and Zach. The band got back together and tossed that together perfectly. I have no musical ability. I offered to throw some words on there, and John said, "Dude, you're the worst thing I've ever heard." So we kept it with that. But that's damn good. That was awesome. He texted me that a few days ago. He's like, "Hey, a little surprise for you." I played it. I was like, that's the perfect sound for what we do on this podcast. Of course, they nail it out the park.
Hey, season 2, right? We got a little bit more free time. We can make ourselves look a little bit more professional and established. We got some merch going now. We got a bunch of, new designs from that merch that also helped with our rebranding. We got an intro. We got an intro reel. Like, we're good to go. Season 2, this time we're a professional act out here. So as I kind of alluded to, though, this is a pretty slow news week for football. Now, one thing that is just occurring to me as, Mark and I are starting this episode because, we plan out a couple of topics and kind of write out a couple of things and how we're going to get the episode started and, have some things to talk about. But one thing we didn't write down that I feel like is a super obvious thing to talk about is the XFL started this week. And Mark, I don't know if you know that the XFL was going to start this week, but like I was out with Hannah on Saturday, and I walk into a bar for us to go grab a drink, and there's football on. I'm like, oh shit, the XFL started. Let's go. And so, I sat down. We were, grabbing this drink, and I just sat there and watched it for a bit. And honestly, like it was some pretty quality football. Like I was pretty stoked on, the fact that. Anytime you walk into a room and you don't expect football to be on and there is football on is a good time, but also like the actual quality of football was pretty good. So I don't know if you caught any of it or what.
I saw some of the highlights, and I have a few former teammates that are playing on some of those teams. So it's pretty cool. I mean, perfectly timed, right? Like right when you think football's done and you're going to be absent from being able to watch that for a while, you walk in and, oh yeah, there's still football on. It's obviously a step down from what you're watching the week prior at the Super Bowl, but it's football. And there's a lot of cool things that they're doing with some of the, how they're scoring points and some of the 2-point conversion rules, 3-point conversions, chance to, instead of an onside kick, go for it on, 4th and whatever. But there's some cool stuff to it that I think the NFL can take a look at. There's some really cool stuff with how they interview players throughout the game, how they do official replay. There's a lot of cool things that I think the NFL can take a look at, and it's worth taking a look at to see if they want to adapt in any way. But, I mean, football's football, like you said. And, if it's on and I'm not doing anything, like there's not many better things I'll choose to do than just watch some ball.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Is of course it's not NFL standard, but like, you got to taper your expectations. Like I'll put it this way. I've sat through a lot of full college football games in my lifetime that were significantly worse quality football than what I watched this past Saturday and Sunday. And I'm not complaining, right? Because then we got 8 weeks of XFL, 8 weeks of USFL, and then we're like pretty much straight into preseason for NFL. So I'll take that over nothing any day of the week. I'm pretty stoked on it. And, a couple interesting stories. Paxton Lynch, former Denver Broncos first-round draft pick, is the first player in football history, as far as I know, to be benched in the NFL, the Canadian Football League, the USFL, and the XFL. And that's pretty brutal.
I don't feel bad for him because he got a nice little paycheck while he was in the NFL. So
he did. I'm sure he's doing all right.
He'll be okay.
Well, and I texted you too. I mean, these guys make $60K a year to essentially play football for 16 weeks, right? I think the prep is about 8 weeks, and then the actual season's about 8 weeks. And like, for guys like Mark who really didn't get his shot properly, I think Mark should go and try out for the XFL or the USFL. I think he'd be in good. I mean, Mark, I know you're still working out. You're probably pretty conditioned. I know, your hands are probably like riding a bike. You'll get those in tip-top shape after running a few routes. Like, what's stopping you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole thing. It's like once you lose it, man. I've been out of it for a couple years. If it was as big of a thing back then, I mean, maybe I would have considered it. Like when I first stopped, I would have had no shame in trying it. But I don't know. I don't think I can go perform the way I need to.
Kurt Warner went through the ringer, and he ended up in the show at the end of the day, and ended up being
He was bagging groceries, man. He was
bagging groceries, arena football, and then finally got his look in the NFL, and we know how that turned out for him. So never too late, Mark.
I'm okay with coaching and doing some podcasting, man. I'm okay with it.
And you're a damn good coach too, and who knows where that's going to take you in life. So and probably at this point too, injury prone, right? I mean, I was thinking about even doing some rec league stuff just because it's even George Mason is like a club football team. I'm pretty sure I'd get freaking clobbered even on a club football team. Like I just don't think my body's ready for it anymore.
What I'm telling you, man, it's like it's one of those things. It's not like other sports or other hobbies. Like once you give it up, you take a few months off. I mean, even when I was still playing, like at the peak of me playing, and the very best I ever was is probably my junior year of college. I partially tore my hamstring, and I had to take about 4 months off. And I couldn't really do anything. I couldn't run. I couldn't bike. I couldn't lift my upper body because like it would still bother my hamstring to bench press or do anything that I wanted to do. So I basically took about 4 or 5 months off. I came back in and tried to practice when we got to spring ball. And I mean, I was just a shell of what I was. It took me literally 3 months to even get close to where I was before my injury. And I don't think I ever reached the same like peak that I was at my junior year after that injury. And it wasn't because of the injury. It was just because of the time between when I was injured and when I could play again. It just like, you just lose stuff that you have. Your instincts start to disappear and you just never really get back.
It's crazy. It's really tough because like, I think this is something that you don't really consider when you're younger, but this goes for anything that I think is like, a very specialized skill set. Cause I have had this happen with guitar is like, you get so good at something. And like when you're younger, you think, okay, all I can possibly do is progress at it. And then actually you can take steps back and you don't realize that. And like, there's been times where I've taken even a few months off of playing guitar, regularly and having a cadence with that. And I come back and I'm like, oh man, like I can no longer do some stuff that I could previously do. Being an athlete is no exception. Being an artist is no exception. Like it's all the same thing. And again, like when you're younger, like I don't think you really realize that until you finally have a moment where you take a step back and you're like, oh, okay. So like, this is why it's this hard to get to that level.
So you either get better or you get worse. They say that, but it's like a real thing. Like you don't stay the same. You're getting worse or you're getting better at whatever you're choosing to, spend your time working on, right? If it's guitar, if it's a sport, whatever you're doing, if you're not consistently trying to improve, you are getting worse. There is not many things that you can get better at I guess like golf's one of my weird things where like sometimes I won't play for a while and I'll show up and I'll be like, wait, I got better. Like I improved, but that's just,
I shake off the rust. Okay. With golf, you and I should definitely, have a couple outings together. It's been a minute for me, but same thing. Like every single time that I pick up the clubs, I think one thing is like when I was younger, I didn't really have the strength to like drive the ball well or anything like that. And now like I just kind of have like that dad strength where it's like, oh, like, okay, I can actually drive the ball like, a decent length. And then all I just got to do is not suck at my short game and I'm playing. We're good to go. So,
yeah.
Anyway, sorry about the side conversation to start the podcast off, but that again, it's the off season. It's gonna happen.
One more side conversation. Before we came on, John said that this was a beanie that I'm wearing. Now, I want to hear what people's take is on this because I don't think it's a beanie. I think how you wear it makes it a beanie because there's not a lot of back sag going on here. I would say that that's not a beanie. It's just a hat, right? But if I had it hanging off the back of my head more like a, skater kind of guy or band guy, as John was trying to get me to say, then it would be a beanie. Am I crazy for saying that, or am I wearing a beanie?
I just think it's the type of hat, right? Because what else are you calling it? Because it's obviously not a dad hat or like a baseball hat or like
It's just a winter hat, right? I mean,
a winter hat. Okay.
am I crazy? Or, I mean, I guess people correct us here, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a beanie. If I'm wearing a beanie, whatever.
Correct you, not correct us. I just call it a beanie. But
That's true. That's true.
yeah, I'm not sure. I actually saw a meme the other day that was like how far down you wear a beanie or a winter hat or whatever on your face is like how shady your job is, right? So like if you wear it like way up high, like you're like an artist or like a tech developer or something like that. And if it's like mid tier, you're like a construction worker, and if it's pulled all the way down, you're probably like a drug dealer or something. Do you think that's a pretty good gauge?
Yeah, I think the more logical gauge is just like the higher up it is on your head, the more drugs you do. I think.
Okay, but that goes in the opposite direction, because if it's pulled like all the way down, like you might be up to some shady business. So
yeah, you're probably a drug dealer at that point. But if you're wearing it high and mighty, you probably are. You're probably high most of the day. I don't know, either that or you're like a hippie or some shit like that. I don't know. I feel like we're looking a lot into the hats, but hey, the way people wear hats can tell you a lot about them. I will say that.
yeah. Speaking of, we have hats now, and we talked about it last week, but the merch store is live. It's www.infinity-merch.com/practice squad store if you're trying to pick up some hats. They're not beanies or winter hats. They are dad hats, but they are adjustable, and you can get them in 3 different colors. So maybe check it out and join this hat debate that Mark and I are having. On football news, I think it's finally time to get there. I think the main thing that I want to talk about, and Mark is kind of eager to talk about, is Eric Bieniemy. Now, Eric Bieniemy has interviewed for a head coaching job 16 times throughout his career, and he never has once been hired as a head coach. And the main reason for that, at least what everybody speculates, is that people don't believe that he is actually the offensive mind behind the success of the Kansas City Chiefs, because players and coaches alike have essentially said, no, it's Andy Reid's show, and Bieniemy's there to help out with some play design, or he doesn't call plays. He doesn't really have much control over the passing game, from what I understand. Like, that's all Andy Reid. And so he took a job this offseason as an offensive coordinator once again, but this time with the Washington Commanders. And Mark and I's assumption is that it's probably like a prove it year where he's going to try to show, no, he can run a productive offense without Andy Reid, and that will probably set him up to maybe earn a head coaching position in the future. So it's an interesting situation. Mark, what's your feelings on it?
I have a lot. I have a lot to say on this, because I mean, the past few seasons, it's been the same dialogue about Eric Bieniemy every season, and there's been different, I guess, avenues and takes that people have that I don't think is fair to say, right? There's been the race take has always been a thing with him. I think that's just, I'm sure that happens, at some times in the hiring process, but with Eric Bieniemy, the guy's gotten 16 interviews. It's not like he's not being considered. And there's, I don't know how many black coaches in the NFL, but there's a lot of them. So I think we're past the point of saying that. I think that's low of people to accuse of the NFL. I mean, you look around you and it's a black dominant players league, and there's plenty of black coaches that have been hired, right? And have done a great
I mean,
job.
not to mention like being an offensive coordinator for a 2-time Super Bowl winning team.
I think you take a step backwards when you start making accusations like that. I don't think that's the case. And some of his own players have come out. I mean, LaShawn McCoy has come out and said, listen, like, we love Eric Bieniemy. He's a great dude. He's a good guy. He's a good coach. But that doesn't mean you're going to be a good head coach. And we've seen it all the time where people get head coaching jobs that they're maybe not ready for, and they fail. Or they go from having – right. Or they go from having –
very similar role where it's like, hey, you're a great coordinator. You do a great job at what you do as a coordinator. You're not ready to be a head coach. It's a different skill set. It's a different expectation.
And, so there's the race thing that I just am so sick of hearing with him, and I'm sure he is sick of it. And I'm sure other people are sick of hearing about it. I really do think you take a step backwards when you start making that accusation at this point. And then I think the other thing that's big is obviously, yes, the rumor of Andy Reid is the real offensive mind there. Now, Eric Bieniemy, I'm sure, like I've been around, higher level football, and what tends to happen is the head coach is usually a defensive primary guy or an offensive primary guy. Most of the NFL are offensive primary guys, which Andy Reid is an offense first guy, has been his whole career. Going into a week, the offensive staff meets and the head coach has the final say, especially if he's an offensive first guy, which Andy Reid has full control. He designs the offensive game plan with the rest of the guys that week. And then Eric Bieniemy calls the plays that they together with receivers, running backs, O-line, everybody with them together calls the plays. And then in the game calls most of the plays. So Eric Bieniemy is doing a lot, but the game plan, the structure, building around the personnel that you have, that's Andy Reid's cup of tea. That's what a head coach is good at. I don't think Eric Bieniemy has that skill set. So to become a head coach, which LaShawn McCoy alluded to, in these offensive staff meetings with and then when players join the room, Eric Bieniemy is not the one going over film breakdown as an offense. He talks to the running backs. He's a former running backs coach. He's a running backs guru. But I can tell you this, in terms of offensive staff, at least in terms of the staffs I've been around, the running backs coach is probably the least intelligent offensive mind on a coaching staff. Run here, run there. Block this guy or block that guy. It's a very simple coaching position, right? And I'm not trying to discredit running backs coaches, but in terms of like if I were to hire an OC or a guy to be a head coach, running backs coaches are usually the last different guy. It's different. Right.
And it's like, but, even if you take a step up to a passing game coordinator, like then you're talking about pre-snap motion and what your intentions are and what your matchups are with the actual personnel you have versus the corners or safeties that are potentially going to be matching up against them. And that has a whole different set because as a running backs coach, at the very least, yes, there's pre-snap motion and there's blocking and there's things like that. But at the end of the day, like it's offensive line creates hole, you run through that hole. That's what it boils down to.
It's there's a lot of things to look at with him. And, to me, I just don't think he'd be a very good head coach because of the fact that he's been able to lean on Andy Reid his entire time in Kansas City. We don't really, like you said, a prove it year. I think we'll see this year the true ability of Eric Bieniemy because he will be running the show now. There's not someone because Ron Rivera is a defensive-minded coach. So the offense will go through Eric Bieniemy. He will design game plan. He will create everything. And the other thing, too, aside from him maybe having Andy Reid as a help and being a running backs coach, he has the ability of Patrick Mahomes to make him look good. And any play caller ever that has a stud quarterback like that can hide behind his talent and his ability to check plays. And when you're just watching the game, you might think, what a great play call. But sometimes Mahomes changed the play or, he made a play with his legs and extended the play. And you get a lot of credit from how good your players are. And the Chiefs have had loaded rosters. They've had a great quarterback. So he's in the perfect system. That's why I think he's thrived and he has great people helping him and the coaching side of things. Now he's on his own with a not great offensive roster with who knows who's going to play quarterback for the Commanders. We'll see, if he's really the guy people are thinking I don't know, dude. If you interview 16 different times for head coaching position, I think there might be something off with your interview.
But at the same time, like all the things that we just mentioned here are probably exactly why owners or managers, have the same trepidation around hiring him. And honestly, I'm excited for him because this was a ballsy move for him. He's taking a risk here, right? He is saying, sure, dude. But like I honestly appreciate and respect that move where he's like, man, this is a comfortable position. I could sit here and game plan, for however long I want and have a winning record every year and go deep in the playoffs every year, get a couple more Super Bowl rings. Like that could have continued to been a situation for as long as he wanted to, but he feels like he wants to be a head coach and he's taking a risky step to try to get to that head coaching position. And it might not work out for him, but it also might work out for him. And for that reason, like I'm excited for him that he's taking that chance. And I do hope that it does work out for him because
he's taking a lateral move to try to take a jump forward. Right. Cause I think he's realizing that staying in Andy Reid's shadow, learning from him all those years was great, but it doesn't seem like it's going to get him that head coaching position that he wants. So he realized he's going to have to go prove it. 16 times he's failed. And he's had opportunities to get a head coaching job. He knows something's missing. And I think that the elephant in the room is you're hiding under Andy Reid's success, and
Yeah.
you need to prove it yourself. So he's betting on himself. I would love to see him succeed because he deserves every opportunity, but he's going to have to earn it, and we'll see. It's a
So,
challenge.
hey, question for you, because obviously you've been in these coaching rooms. And for those that don't know, Mark's father is the head coach of the Adams Highlanders, who Mark coaches for. So how many times have you brought up something in one of those offensive meetings, and your dad is just totally vetoed it, and it has got, and
Every
then
single
the family
idea I've
cuffs
ever
come
had.
off?
Every idea I've ever had, he's vetoed first. And then it takes either me to yell at him or show him video of someone else doing it, or sometimes I'll do a lot of play scripts on practice days, and sometimes I'll just put it in there without him knowing, and he'll see it and he goes, "What the hell was that?" And it will work, and he'll have to see it. Or some other coach will have to take my side, and I'll have to basically get a group effort against him. He will veto 95% of the things that I say the first time he hears it.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it's a back and forth thing, and eventually I think we get to a good spot in our game plan, because he'll have a bunch of things I disagree with, and then we just kind of eventually come to a middle point where it's hey, some of the stuff works and some of my stuff works, so let's do it all.
Your dad's stubborn adherence to the triple option is what has made him a legendary high school coach, and is what made Adams football successful. So I totally understand that part. But yeah, so you obviously have a lot of great ideas of your own, and I've seen those how they translate, on the field the past couple of years. So, I guess at some point you're just gonna have to stop living in your dad's shadow and go take an offensive coordinator job somewhere else. So
yeah.
All right, so that covers that. Another topic that I want to move into. I love this player as a player. I love watching him play football. I need this man to shut his mouth on Twitter, and that man is Micah Parsons. So he was talking all sorts of shit towards Detroit because of the fact that Amon-Ra was suggesting that we wanted to get Jalen Ramsey over to Detroit. And I think there's a separate conversation about whether or not I think that's a good idea. But Micah was essentially no one's coming from LA to Detroit. You guys are a poverty franchise. It's just not going to happen. And I just want to personally point out that the Dallas Cowboys, since Micah Parsons has been born, has made the same number of NFC Championship appearances as the Detroit Lions have. So, yes, a lot more playoff appearances, but not a whole lot of playoff success. And I don't see any way that Dallas climbs out of that hole anytime soon. I think this year was the best that they've looked. And what did they do? They beat up on a
they do what they always do.
Beat up on a Tampa Bay team with a losing record. So they got one step further than they usually do, and they lost to the first good team that they played. So
one step forward, two steps back. Okay. Micah Parsons needs to shut his damn mouth. All right. And he's a great player. It doesn't mean I like him as a player. Player, he does everything that you could possibly ask him to do, and he does it very well. I respect the hell out of him as a player. I mean, he's one of the best players in the league, period. But dude runs his mouth a lot, man. Runs his mouth a lot. And to talk shit about Detroit, I mean, I'll be honest with you, LA is not a great place to live. I don't know what he's talking about. I mean, unless you're a famous actor there, kind of one of the shittiest places to be.
Yeah, crime rate and homelessness problem.
Crime rate, homelessness.
I mean,
Detroit, people are full of themselves. It's just it's a fantasy land for the top 1%, and the rest of LA is a shithole. It's hell. So I mean, it's whatever. Maybe for Jalen Ramsey, it's great, cool. He's got perfect weather, but you want to come win football games right now, I think you come to Detroit. And that's the first time in a long time we can say that. And for him to try to take a shit on Detroit when they finally are climbing. By the way, we were a fumble on the goal line away from beating their ass. So
yeah. Well, and I gotta are we playing the Cowboys next year? Because I really hope we are. Let me see. Detroit schedule. Lions 2023.
Probably aren't.
We are.
We are? What in Detroit?
We don't know because of oh no, it's at Dallas Cowboys.
Again, it's so annoying. We just played there.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate. But we are playing them next year, so I hope we smack him in the mouth. And the Micah Parsons can stop running his mouth, and
we'll keep tabs.
We'll definitely keep receipts on it for sure. But now I want to get into the conversation. Is Jalen Ramsey worth paying and or trading for, depending on whether or not he gets cut or they try to put him on the trade block? Personally, I say no. I say if we're going to try to trade for somebody, the only person that I think is worth spending potentially a first round draft pick and taking on a big contract and stuff like that is currently in the league at his position is Marshawn Lattimore. That's pretty much it in my book, because the Saints are in a really tough cap situation. And so they might be looking to offload some high profile players like that. I think Lattimore is just a better fit all around. He doesn't have that same kind of ego. He has more of a Dan Campbell personality. He's played under Dan Campbell. I think that's a better fit personally. I think Ramsey's heading towards the end of his prime as a player. I think that he's got a really big ego. I think it's more about him than it is about winning. Like, he's gotten his ring. He's not really hungry for that kind of stuff anymore. That's the way I see it. I think Brad Holmes is smarter to really break the bank for a guy like Jalen Ramsey personally.
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey, I don't know if we have to do any sort of free agency move. But if we're going to do one, I agree with you that Marshawn Lattimore would be a better fit for all of the reasons you just said. Jalen Ramsey's a great player, and I do think he's got a lot of great football left in him, but it's not always just about your skill set. There's a culture that the Lions have built, and we're successful with probably not as good of a roster as most of these teams. I think partially because of the culture and the fact that these players buy into an unselfish team feel that Dan Campbell's created.
Which is hard as hell to do in the NFL.
To do in the NFL, very hard to do. That's more of a college coaching approach. He's done a great job of that. But Jalen Ramsey doesn't fit that mold. He comes in, he's going to have an ego, like you said. He's cocky. He's a superstar, right? He's got that LA, vibe mentality. He's going to come into Detroit and think he owns the place before he's done a single thing here. And I don't think that would mix well with the guys that we have who are pretty much all underdogs on our team. I mean, even Jared Goff, who was kind of hyped up his entire career, he was traded away. And he after having basically given everything to him his whole career at Cal and high school, he's a top recruit, comes to the Rams, goes to a Super Bowl like as a young kid, and then he gets traded away for the superstar Matt Stafford, right? That would piss anyone off, right? If you're Jared Goff, I just took my team to the Super Bowl, and no, we didn't win, but I mean, I just took my team to the Super Bowl. You're going to trade me off to Detroit, and for a guy who's towards the end of his career who's never won anything, that would piss me off too, right? So he comes here, he had a prove it year, he did very well. Everyone on our team, even the guys like Hutchinson, right? They have this underdog approach, and Jalen Ramsey is not an underdog.
Right.
Okay.
And I think it also serves Dan Campbell well, and this is partially credit to Brad Holmes as well, that they have the second youngest roster in all of the NFL. And so, like, these guys that are coming in that are younger, like, college is a little bit more fresh in their mind. And I think the Dan Campbell cultural style, he can get away with a lot more exactly with what you're saying, because of the fact that we have a really young roster. These guys feel like they got to prove it. They feel like they're underdogs. I mean, shit, even the way that Amon-Ra St. Brown talks, right? Where he's like, whatever it was, 13, 14 other receivers got selected in the draft before me. And I remember every single one of their names because I shouldn't have been picked that low. Like, that's just that dog mentality, right?
The only guy on our team that was like a top pick that always had the hype was Hawkinson, and we got rid of him. Like, Hawkinson was like, I mean, I can't think of another, Goff, but again, for what I just said, Goff's an underdog because of what happened with the trade. Like, that set him back in terms of where he was heading in his career.
Right.
Getting traded away like that reset everything. He was now a nobody again.
And the Sewell football family's entire brand is being like really humble and good people and stuff like that. Right. So even though he's a first round pick, he definitely doesn't act like some tool. I mean, offensive linemen in general, I don't think really make the game.
I guess Hutch would be the only other superstar guy that we have that was always kind of projected to be great. So
and the Jags passed him for a guy that got a quarter as many sacks last season.
Right. So everyone's got a chip on their shoulder, I think. And even if you are a superstar, like, I think one of the things that made Tom Brady great for so long, Kobe Bryant, Jordan, all these guys, no matter how much credit they got, there was always, like, they could have 1,000 people tell them how great they are. But the one person that says, I don't think you're all that, That's what sticks in their head.
Right.
So those people are just the ultra competitive people that will always be trying to prove they'll make Michael Jordan. I don't know if have you watched The Last Dance, the documentary on him?
I haven't, but I do know the story that you're about to tell, which is that Jordan would make up things
He would
in his
make up
head
shit.
just to give himself a higher.
He would
competitive
literally
fire.
pretend, he would like psych himself out and pretend someone said something to him that they never said.
That's crazy.
Like that's just the kind of, and I think that the Lions take that kind of approach, so just keep that in mind now as we kind of circle this back to Micah Parsons. The Lions are going to remember today and what he tweeted. Those players are going to remember it.
100%.
Dan Campbell's going to see it. It's not going to be a very nice approach when it comes time to play the Cowboys next year. And it's not
I
just
don't
going to
know
be
if you
Amon
noticed,
Ra.
the Panthers took a few shots as well, and they are on our schedule as well because of the fact that I believe we're playing the entire NFC South this season. We're playing the Falcons, Tampa, Saints, and Panthers. And yeah, they're so mostly beat writers and stuff like that. But they pretty much were saying, oh, like Reich was able to get all these Detroit coaches to come here because no one wins in Detroit and they wanted a better opportunity here. Like, I just, as a Lions fan, man, like I've never been so fired up about this team, what we're potentially going to do this offseason, and everybody we're going to prove wrong going into the season. Because the thing is if you're truly a shitty team and you truly suck, like nobody's even making these comments, right? Like people aren't making these comments about the Texans right now. Like everybody knows that team sucks, right? What's happening, in my opinion, is that like we're on a bunch of people's maps and we're sticking out in their minds because they know that like we're an actual threat for the first time in 20, 30 years, right? And that's
I think a lot of
exciting
people are in
as well.
denial. I think
Yeah.
that people aren't used to hearing the Detroit Lions talked about in the same sentence as the Dallas Cowboys in terms of competing for playoffs and winning playoff games. So all of a sudden, people hear Lions put in the same conversation. It almost offends them. They're like, "Wait, what? Detroit sucks. They always have, right? They're a terrible franchise. Yeah, they have been.
Hey,
but
you heard Rodgers saying it all last season. We don't lose
all
to
last
that
season,
team.
did
We're
not
going to
give him
beat
credit.
this team. Yeah. Pat McAfee, as much as I love him and watch his show every day, talking a bunch of shit because of the fact that Dan Campbell wouldn't accept an interview in Week 18, preparing for what was the biggest game of his career that he ended up winning. And like all these condescending remarks, Rodgers in his head just still thinks it's that same trash team. That same trash team has beat him 3 of the past 4 games that they've played against each other. So again, look, I don't want to beat the drum too hard. Mark and I are pretty stoked for this next season, but all the like people keep receipts, and like I can guarantee
keep
you
it coming. Keep this doubt coming, dude. I'll probably at some point doubt the Lions again, and I'll come on here and I'll say, listen, I'm getting a little worried about all this props that people are giving them, just like I did this past year, and I'll get proven wrong. I'll be that guy, but something needs to fuel the fire. And if people, if you come into the season and think you're just going to roll in there and do what you did last year and win 8 or 9 games, it doesn't happen. You got to come out and play with that underdog pissed off mentality that they played with this year.
You repented this past season too, but
I did.
That's the thing is all these guys, I guarantee you, especially during the off season, they're on social media, they're seeing the shit people are saying. Like you cannot shut your eyes away from it, no matter how hard you try. Like what people are saying if you're a player. So I'm sure they're gonna remember that. Other thing that's kind of worth talking about is just kind of the quarterback carousel situation. So Aaron Rodgers is in the darkness. Still, I think he emerges from
this
the
is
dark.
day 4, right? I think this is his last day of the cleanse.
From what I understand, yes. It might be another day. He was vague about when exactly he was going in. I'm not exactly sure why. Probably just so that we have yet another thing to speculate on pertaining to Aaron Rodgers. But he's going to come out, and it sounds like he's going to get traded. Right? That's everybody from the Green Bay management organization. It makes it sound like Aaron Rodgers is not going to be a member of the Packers next year. Then you got Derek Carr, who is taking interviews with any team that's willing to talk to him right now. There's some speculation around Justin Fields. I don't really think that's like anything crazy. You got Ryan Tannehill. Who am I missing? Baker Mayfield. Like there's a lot of quarterbacks that are going to get shifted around here. What are your predictions just out of the 4 or 5 I mentioned there, Mark, and maybe any that I was potentially missing?
Well, I said this a few episodes ago about Rodgers going to Vegas, and that was back when Tom Brady had not retired. And you were thinking Brady might go to Vegas because of McDaniels, and then obviously Brady retired, kind of threw a wrench in that. But I think Rodgers to Vegas is probably the most likely thing, especially with Derek Carr visiting the Jets this week and seeming like it was a good both sides enjoyed that visit. I think Derek Carr probably goes to the Jets, and I think that they think that they have a real chance of being a Super Bowl contender with that pickup. I think Aaron Rodgers goes to Vegas. I think some of these other teams. I think that the Colts draft a guy.
Colts will draft a guy. Where's Baker Mayfield going?
I think he stays in LA. I think he develops behind Stafford. Stafford, I think, probably has 1, maybe 2 years left in him.
I agree.
And I think Baker has accepted the fact that he maybe does a little bit of a backup role to stay in the league. And will get another opportunity to be a starter at some point down the road. I think he understands that he needs to take a step back, which is, I think, a maturity step for him. But I mean, that's where I don't think there's any other crazy things going to happen at the quarterback
Jimmy
position.
G?
Tampa, maybe.
Tampa, I could see him being a Saint. I could also see him being a Panther. Man, the NFC South is really hungry for quarterbacks right now. I prefer Carr as a Saint, honestly. But Loomis has, which he figures it out every year somehow, some way, but he has a whole lot of cap hell he has to deal with. Once again, not as bad as previous years.
You know what I realized, John?
What's up?
I witnessed the last Aaron Rodgers game as a Packer, and we didn't know that would be the case. But all those videos of me that I was filming him in pregame when I was down the field talking shit and whatnot was the last of him ever in a Packers uniform.
That's crazy.
And it didn't really feel like that was the case, because it felt like the Packers.
Especially since he left in disgrace.
Yeah, and it felt like the Packers were going to win that game, and it just, it felt like what we had always seen was going to happen. Right? They were going to win. They were going to go to the playoffs, make a run. I mean, everyone was thinking that, especially with Seattle, winning and getting in, and then the Lions weren't playing for a playoff spot anymore. It just felt like, oh shit, here we go again. And then we played spoiler, and then obviously there was some rough emotions after the game with the Packers and how that all went down, and then all of a sudden it seems like they're going to go separate ways. So that was kind of weird to think about.
That is bizarre, honestly. And as much as I do really like Aaron Rodgers, if he goes to the Jets Super Bowl window, I think if he goes to the Raiders, like, it is not going to be graceful like it was with Tom Brady, where he gets like to kind of remake his entire brand by saying he saved this team, took another team to the Super Bowl. I just don't think the Raiders are in that position personally. Jets, I'd say a little bit more in that position. I feel the same way if Carr goes to. By the way, like, I think Jets truly are like a legitimate, competent franchise QB away from actually being able to put together a pretty deep playoff run. So
I know you have your doubts with Vegas. I understand they got some holes that they got to fix on the defensive side, especially, but they have enough pieces. I think if you add a guy like Aaron Rodgers in a new environment, he's going to be happier in Vegas. He's going to be back with Devontae. He's going to create connections with Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs. I think they're going to draft some O-line and some defensive pieces. You still have Chandler Jones and Max Crosby to wreak havoc on quarterbacks. And if you can get some help in the secondary, I don't know. I don't think they're as far away from being a contender as you think.
Yeah, it's just tough for me because of the fact that I've seen, I guess it's really my faith in Vegas's ownership and management, because I have watched this team have every opportunity in the world to take that step that you're referring to and like not just shoot themselves in the foot, but like blow their entire legs off like every single time. It's so bad. It's embarrassing. And like even how they handled, Richie Bisaccia, who like along with Derek Carr helped pull that season out of the jaws of death and actually make it to the playoffs. And what do? They get rid of Richie Bisaccia for McDaniels, who's did not have a good run as a first-year coach with them. And then they get rid of Derek Carr, who has been that team's emotional rock through all of the trials and tribulations that their ownership and management have put them through. And that's what
Yeah.
makes me not have faith in that. It's not so much the players, it's not so much the roster. It's that I have watched this team for a decade mismanage themselves into the ground, even though they've had some amazing opportunities handed to them on a silver platter to actually take that next step.
You're forgetting one huge factor. Mark Davis shaved the head.
Okay, so now he's got evil billionaire persona, and
He's
about
got Dr.
results.
Evil vibes, dude. Listen,
Yeah.
he's got Dr. Evil vibes, and he's about to get Aaron Rodgers. You know,
I love how I just made like an essay thesis on like why Vegas can't do it, and you're like, hey, Mark Davis is bald now. They're good to go.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I think people will take my side in this debate.
Did you see how I just reacted to that? I was like, okay, you know what? You're right. Like,
yeah, I think
Mark
you know
Davis is
you
bald
made
now.
every logical point in the world, and then I just was like, yeah, but you know, Dr. Evil's your owner, so
I think that pretty much sums up like even in high school how he was, right? I'd sit there and write out an essay thesis about my opinion, but then like somebody would come in with the meathead opinion, and that was the cool one, so we're good to go. Okay, other relevant topics. I saw
John
that you sent me a chat. Okay, so we're 41 minutes into the podcast, and the ticker's down below. Oh, you know what I got to add too now is the link to the merch store. Should I just take the ticker off and add it right now?
if you would like to, I can keep the people distracted. I don't know if you check out the Dwight Schrute. This is like basically what I say to John like every single time he speaks. That's my vibe. He says some logical, good arguments always. They're always good arguments, and I always have an answer for them, no matter how stupid it sounds. You know.
Yeah, but I would say overall this past season, which I guess we're gonna put this to the test right now, is I think overall I had better takes throughout the season that ended up being more correct than your takes throughout the season.
I would have to agree. I think we were probably pretty close on picking winners, but yeah, I think you had the Lions take from the get-go, which gives you a ton of points. In the playoffs, I think I beat you.
You were better in the playoffs. In the regular season, I was literally statistically better. I
were better, yeah.
On average, guessed more winners than you did.
Yeah.
But neither of us really did all that great with that. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead, hit present here, and Mark and I are actually going to cover our pre-season position rankings. So for those of you who have actually been watching us for roughly the past year, one of the things we did going into the season was we ranked our top 5 players at each position. Each critical position. So I believe it was wide receivers, quarterbacks, edge rushers, tight ends, and running backs were the 5 that we did. And so I thought it would be fun to go back and see how poorly, most likely, each of these has aged. And then from there, potentially say, okay, how would we revise this now as like a season in review? Who actually was some of those top players? So without further ado, we'll start with wide receivers. First look at mine, I'm thinking mid-take, bad take because of his injury, mid-take, mid-take, mid-take. Mark's, I'd say yours was probably better than mine for 2 reasons. You got Justin Jefferson and Stephon Diggs in there.
Yeah,
I would say your only bad take was Kupp.
I wouldn't call Kevin Cooper Kupp. So John and I both have Cooper Kupp as our second ranked receiver. Devontae Adams was for both of us the first. I wouldn't call Kupp a bad take because before his injury, he was the leading receiver in the league, and he was on pace to come close statistically as he did the season before. And that was on a way worse Rams team. So he was individually having a fantastic season before
he was their entire offense.
He was in their entire offense. So I wouldn't say it's a bad take. Barring an injury, he would have ended up being probably a top 2 or 3 receiver in the league. John has Deebo as his third, Jamar Chase fourth, and Tyreek Hill as his fifth. I have Tyreek Hill third, Diggs fourth, and Jefferson fifth. I do think me having Jefferson in there gives me some points. He should be probably higher, but having him in the top
Jefferson
5,
should have been 1 or 2, in my opinion. Yeah. Looking at the season, I'd say Jefferson was like Calvin Johnson-esque, where his team wasn't that good. And
I mean, he won Offensive Player of the Year.
right,
I mean,
exactly.
that goes to show he broke records. He was ridiculous all season long. I think having Tyreek Hill in here is big for both of us. He was on a new
very
team,
productive. He was
very productive.
this
Even
year.
with Jalen Waddle taking a lot of his targets, Tyreek Hill had a great year, and then Devontae Adams, even on a horrible team, still all pro with a several different quarterbacks playing. Derek Carr playing kind of unhappy.
Jamar was plenty productive this season, but I'd say Diggs was a better take. And Debo did not have as productive as a season, but the thing with Debo is that like when he gets the ball, he always makes it matter. So I don't know how I would have put that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have Debo in the top 5. Very great player, but
yeah, I'd say Diggs and Jefferson should be in there over Chase and Debo for sure.
Yeah, I like my list. I think that's a pretty good list, actually.
I think you were more accurate, and hey, you played wide receivers, so I guess you kind of hope that, right? You definitely had a better eye for it. Moving on to QBs. I see one that's glaringly bad on both of our lists, and I'd say the rest are pretty damn accurate.
Aaron Rodgers on both of our lists in the top. So John's list, we have Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Stafford, Herbert, Mahomes, and my list was Allen, Rodgers, Mahomes, Brady, Burrow.
John, once again say your list was better.
I would have to agree. Matthew Stafford on here is bad.
It's bad. And you said this.
I said that in the beginning when you did this.
Yeah, you said
I got fired up when you did this. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You got really upset when I had Stafford on the list in the first place. I'll give that to you. He was not playing well prior to his injury, and then obviously his injury happened. He was out for the rest of the season.
Led the league in picks before his injury, and I don't know how many games they had won. I think 1 or 2. So bad. Aaron Rodgers being on both our lists, bad. You have him as your top guy. I have him as my second guy. He was bad.
I honestly don't know if it's that bad because he threw more interceptions than he usually did this season for sure. But I'm reluctant to credit Green Bay's failure as a team with his quarterback play. I think he wasn't as good as his past 2 seasons, in which once again he was MVP in the NFL. But I would say overall he still was probably like a top 7 or 8 quarterback in the league. Would I go?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, compared to what we're used to seeing out of him, he needs to be held to a higher standard, especially coming off of an MVP season. He shouldn't be on either top 5. If we had to redo this, he would not be in either list. I think we can both agree he would be.
I don't think Brady should be on the list either. With the way he played this season, he was not great.
He again, same thing, held him to a higher standard. I had him at 4. Again, same thing you said. I don't think you credit the bad season to Tom Brady. I think you actually have to give him some credit for somehow being in the playoffs with how bad of a team they had around him and the injuries they had around him. But statistically, he was bad. He was nowhere near what he could be. Or what he
most past attempts, so I guess you can give him that. But I don't think. I think that's kind of like a participation trophy.
Exactly, and that's a stat that doesn't matter. I mean,
right? Exactly. As far as who we left out of this,
Jalen Hurts.
Duh. Yeah, we both probably should have put a little bit more respect on Hurts' name.
I mean, Mahomes is on both of ours. You had him at 5, which is, I think he proved you wrong. They're pretty.
Yeah, he
should be number 1 on both of ours.
Yeah, for sure.
I got Burrow on mine. You don't, and I think he's probably
which I should have.
He's probably the second best guy in the league.
Yeah, he should be there instead of Stafford for sure.
And then Josh Allen, we both had probably too high.
I don't think my Herbert take is bad. I think even playing through injury, he was pretty damn good this year. Not quite as good as he was the year prior, but he still was. I think he held up.
So who do you think? I mean, there's a few other names that Trevor Lawrence.
Nah, I don't think he breaks top 5. No,
I mean he beat Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and he played some damn good football this year, and I think
Kirk Cousins
starting to show is no, absolutely not. Kirk Cousins, parentheses, 1 o'clock time frame only in quarters 1 through 3. And then we can have a discussion.
I don't know. He had plenty of comebacks, dude.
I don't know.
He was the fourth quarter king this year at 1 o'clock.
I don't know.
Tua?
Tua, look, you take a look at the Miami Dolphins with and without Tua, there's definitely a discussion to be had there. He had a damn good season. It sucks that he got concussed 3 times. I am praying that he makes a full recovery for next season, or because I'm actually afraid that his career is going to get cut short. Obviously not hoping that's the case. 3 concussions in 1 season is no joke. So, edge rushers. I had Aaron Donald, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Cameron Jordan. Barring Aaron Donald injury, I am perfectly content with my list, frankly.
Yeah, Bosa's got to be higher on both of our lists. I have Aaron Donald at 1, TJ Watt at 2, Nick Bosa 3rd, Myles Garrett 4th, and Max Crosby 5th.
I would say Jones had a better season than Crosby did, but I don't know if I can statistically back that up.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty close. Bosa's got to be higher on both of our lists. Micah Parsons isn't on either of our lists. But they're not horrible. I think TJ Watt is good where he's at. Myles Garrett wasn't as great as I think people expect him to be this year.
Never mind. Max Crosby had 12.5 sacks, so he belongs on that list for sure.
Yeah, I mean those aren't bad lists. I don't think.
Cameron Jordan, I think he had 11 or 12 sacks on the season.
Yeah, he had a good year again. On a bad team,
Yeah,
but
like I said, if Aaron Donald played a full season, I'm sure he would be number 1 or 2 as well. So I'm not going to say this take was bad because it's not like he played poorly. He just only played half the season.
Tight
ends.
Gronk.
So both of our 4s are horrible. Kyle Pitts was atrocious this season. And I would know from experience because I had him on my fantasy roster and I took him, I think, in like the 3rd or 4th round, and it did not work out well for me. And then you have Gronk up here because apparently he didn't retire yet.
Remember what I said, though? I did say I'm putting Gronk because he's not in the league right now, but if he comes back, he will have a top 5 tight end.
Yeah, and I think those conversations were the loudest around the time we made this list, actually, about Brady trying to recruit him back for 1 more season. But look, Kelsey's for sure number 1. Kittle's for sure number 2. Darren Waller, I'd say he probably was a 5.
He might not even be in the top 5.
Yeah,
based on
he did not have that great of a season. Hawkinson had a very productive season, and so did Dawson Knox. Mark, you were right about Knox. I picked him up off of waivers during fantasy, and I mean, not like a knock it out of the park tight end, but he was always good for a few points.
I think he had 5 or 6 straight games with a touchdown there towards the end of the season.
That he did. He had a really good first couple of games, not the best midseason, and then a really good end to his season. So yeah, I think we're both pretty good with this list, except both of our number 4s are pretty atrocious. And then RBs. So yeah, Jonathan Taylor. So I had Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. You had Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones. My list, Kamara was not a top 5 running back this year.
No.
I mean, shit, dude. Like Breece Hall had a really good season until he tore his ACL. Honestly, Isaiah Pacheco was really good this past year. Trying to think of who else.
Jamal Williams had a good.
Obviously, Jamal Williams. Neither of us could have seen that coming. I mean, breaking Barry Sanders' record. I don't think any of us would have witnessed.
Josh Jacobs was the leading rusher with, I'll say this. I think I would give this to you because you have Chubb, who was I think he was also a top 3 rusher. You have Dalvin Cook, who had a great year. Derrick Henry's always pretty consistent, even on his down year.
You took issue with my Chubb ranking too. I remember that.
I did I thought he was going to split time more with Kareem, and he did not.
Yeah,
He did
and
not.
they
So he had a great year.
and I said they were going to lean on him heavy without Watson around,
Mhm.
and that's exactly what they did. And I mean, he is, and it's what's funny enough too is his productivity did actually drop a little bit when Watson came back because they were relying more on
Right.
the pass game there. He was a freaking bruiser while Jacoby Brissett was starter. So
Yeah, both these lists aren't great. I will
No.
say I think I get huge points for having Eckler. He was the
Yeah.
top running back fantasy wise.
Yeah, and he was a stud all season. I'm surprised they actually didn't put him on the list. I think I would have probably put him instead of Cook or Kamara in hindsight. It's tough, for one position for us to be the most wrong on. I think this makes sense because running backs truly, it's like year over year. I mean, here's a piece of advice that I think you can probably take to the bank is never draft a fantasy running back purely based off of their performance last season. I think that's always a move that's going to burn you, because they never ever match the production of the season before if they are like a top
It's
one or
all
two running back
about
in the league.
matchups, the team around them, the scheme that they're in. I mean, look at what happened with Christian McCaffrey. We didn't.
Yeah.
Neither of us had him on those lists, and I remember when we made those lists.
We had a conversation about why is he not here?
Why
It's
is he
'cause
not
he's
on
so freaking injury prone.
And at the time he was with Carolina, and we were
Yep.
like, he's not going to have a big year.
Yep.
And we were right until he was traded, and he
And
became probably the top running back in
huge.
football once he was traded.
He was huge
So-
for the 49ers. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's all the topics we kind of had listed out for this episode, Mark. I don't know if there's anything else you want to mention. We can keep this one a little bit short and sweet since it's such a slow news week. And looking forward, I think we got some mock drafts that we should do. I think that would be a lot of fun. And as we get closer and closer, I think Combine's next week. So we're going to have things to talk about related to the Combine, start putting those mock drafts together. There's some pretty stellar guests coming up. A lot of good stuff. But yeah, I mean, this week and then like the 2 or 3 weeks before the preseason really starts are kind of the driest news weeks in football. I feel bad for guys like Pat McAfee who have to be on 3-4 hours a day. I mean, I don't know what they're going to, and I've seen it before. Like they pretty much just screw around for 2.5 to 3 of those hours because they don't know what to talk about. Thankfully, we just have to talk for an hour a week. We had good football related content, a couple of debates about hats.
Listen, you can always get into a Beanie debate.
Yeah,
those are hot right now. The Beanie debate is going around. It's hot. A lot of disagreements going around.
Yeah,
so that's out there.
We will see you guys next week, potentially with a guest. We got a few that could be some pretty big ones that we've been talking to. But yeah, we'll probably honestly do a little more XFL coverage too, because I'm going to be watching it. DC Defenders tried to get a beer snake going. Security broke it up. They started throwing lemons on the field. Me and my friends here in DC saw that and we're just like, okay, we got to go to a Defenders game now and act like we're the biggest fans of all time, because why else do you show up to an XFL game? You got to have some fun.
Of course.
But yeah, other than that, we will see you guys next week, which should be not quite as slow as this week as far as NFL news goes.
I'm sure stuff will pick up.
Yeah, and look, I think this was plenty entertaining as an episode. So we will catch you guys next time. Peace.
See you guys.